The evening rush had taken over the street. Cars moved slowly, horns sounded now and then, and people walked past the bright restaurant windows without stopping. Inside, soft lights reflected on clean tables, and the smell of warm food drifted out every time the door opened. Outside, just a few steps away from all that comfort, she sat on the cold ground with her back against the wall. She did not ask anyone for money. She did not hold a sign. She simply sat there, knees pulled close to her chest, hands resting on an old cloth bag that held everything she owned. Her shoes were worn, her clothes thin, but she kept them as clean as she could. Her hair was tied back loosely, not because she cared about how she looked, but because it kept her face clear and her vision open. People passed her without looking. Some were busy checking their phones. Others were laughing with friends or arguing about dinner choices. Few noticed her for a second and then quickly looked away, as if eye contact might make them uncomfortable. She was used to that. After a while, you learn how to exist without being seen. She had chosen this spot for a reason. The restaurant was warm, and the light coming through the windows made the night feel a little less lonely. Sometimes when the staff came out to throw trash, the warmth followed them for a few seconds. Those few seconds meant more to her than most people could understand. Her stomach hurt, but she had learned how to ignore it. Hunger had become a quiet companion. What hurt more was the silence, the noise of the street, but the silence inside her. The kind that comes when you have no one waiting for you, no place to return to, and no one asking if you are okay. She watched the people inside the restaurant. Couples sat across from each other, leaning in close. Families shared plates and stories from their day. Friends laughed loudly, their voices full of life. She did not feel angry at them. She did not feel jealous. Mostly, she felt tired. Tired of surviving. Tired of pretending she was strong all the time. She had not always lived like this. Was a time when she had a small room, a job that barely paid enough, and someone she trusted. That life felt far away now, like a story that belonged to someone else. When things fell apart, they did not do so all at once. It happened slowly, one problem after another, until there was nothing left to hold on to. She remembered the night she first slept outside. She had cried quietly, afraid that someone might hear her. The ground felt harder than she expected, and the sky felt too big. That night she promised herself she would survive, no matter how long it took. That promise was the only thing she still carried with her. As she sat outside the restaurant, she noticed him for the first time. He came out through the glass door, speaking on his phone, his voice calm and confident. His clothes were neat, his shoes clean, and his posture straight. Looked like someone who belonged to the world inside the restaurant. He ended the call and stood still for a moment, as if thinking about something important, and his eyes moved, almost by accident, and landed on her. At first, he thought she was waiting for someone. That was how still she was. Then he noticed. The bag, the way her shoulders were slightly bent forward, and the tired look in her eyes. Something about her presence made him pause. He had seen many people sitting on sidewalks before, but this felt different. He was not sure why. There was no dramatic moment. No sudden feeling of guilt or shock. Just a quiet sense that he should not ignore her. She felt his gaze and looked up. Her eyes met for a brief second. She expected him to look away like everyone else, and she was already prepared for that. Familiar feeling of being invisible again. But he did not look away. He did not stare either. He simply looked at her, as if he was trying to understand something. That made her uncomfortable at first. Being seen can feel more frightening than being ignored. She lowered her eyes, focusing on the ground. She did not want pity. She did not want questions. She had learned that most help came with conditions and most kindness did not last. He took a small step forward, then stopped. He seemed unsure of himself, as if he was stepping into a situation he did not fully understand. For a moment, he considered going back inside. He had plans. He had meetings the next morning. His life was full of responsibilities, yet something held him there. He noticed her hands. They were rough, marked by cold and work, but they were clean. That detail stayed with him. It told a story of someone who still cared, even when life had taken almost everything. He cleared his throat softly. Are you okay? He asked. His voice was not loud. It did not demand an answer. It sounded real. She looked up again, surprised. People rarely ask that question without meaning something else. She hesitated, then nodded slightly. I'm fine, she said. It was the easiest answer. He knew it was not true, but he also knew that pushing would not help. He stood there for a moment, unsure what to say next. I was just leaving, he said slowly. I saw you sitting here. She waited. She had heard many unfinished sentences before. I don't want to bother you, he added. You're not, she replied quietly. There was an awkward silence. Cars passed. Someone laughed nearby. The world kept moving as if this small moment did not matter. But for both of them it did. He glanced back at the restaurant door. Then he looked at her again. It's cold, he said. She gave a small shrug. You get used to it, so that answer stayed with him. No one should have to get used to being cold. He reached into his pocket, then stopped himself. He did not want to insult her. He did not want this to feel like charity thrown at a problem. Would you like something warm to eat? He asked instead. She was quiet for a long moment. Trust did not come easily. But her hunger spoke louder than her fear. If it's okay, she said. He nodded and went back inside. As she waited, she wondered if he would really return. Many people made offers and disappeared. She prepared herself for disappointment just in case. But he did come back, holding a simple meal and a cup of something hot. He handed it to her carefully, as if it mattered how he did it. Thank you, she said, her voice softer now. You're welcome, he replied. He did not stay long. He did not ask her personal questions. He did not try to fix her life in one conversation. Simply wished her a good night and walked away. She watched him go, feeling something she had not felt in a long time. Not hope, not relief, but the quiet feeling of being seen, and for him. He walked down the street. The image of her sitting outside that restaurant stayed in his mind. He did not know why yet, but he knew this was not the end of that moment. It was only the beginning. The next morning, the street looked different. The restaurant was closed, its windows dark, and the smell of food was gone. The city felt colder in daylight. She sat in the same spot, not because she expected anything, but because it had become familiar. Familiar places feel safer when you have nowhere else to go. She kept thinking about the night before, not the food, not the warmth, but the way he had looked at her. Not like a problem, not like something broken, just like a person. That feeling stayed with her longer than the heat from the cup he had given her. She told herself not to expect anything more. Expectation only led to disappointment. Life had taught her that lesson many times. Still, when evening came again, she found herself glancing at the restaurant door more often than usual. Inside, the lights turned on, one by one. The same sounds returned. Plates, voices, soft music. The world she watched from the outside came alive again. He arrived later that evening. This time he was not on his phone. He walked slower, as if his mind was somewhere else. He had tried to forget her. He had told himself she was just one person among many who struggled every day. But something kept pulling him back to that street. When he saw her sitting there again, a strange mix of relief and concern filled him. Relief that she was still there, still safe. Concern because that also meant nothing had changed for her. He did not approach her right away. He stood across the street for a moment, watching how people passed her without stopping. How invisible she was to the rest of the world. She noticed him before he crossed the road. She recognized his walk, the calm way he moved. Her heart beat a little faster, and she did not know why. She reminded herself not to read too much into it. He walked over and stopped a few steps away. Good evening, he said. She looked up and nodded. Good evening. I wasn't sure if you'd be here, he admitted. She gave a small smile. I'm usually here. That simple sentence told him more than she realized. He sat down on the low step near her. Not too close, not too far. That small action surprised her. Most people stayed standing, ready to leave at any second. I hope yesterday helped, he said. It did, she replied honestly. They sat in silence for a moment. It was not uncomfortable. It felt calm. I come here often, he said, but I never really noticed what was outside. She nodded. That's normal, He looked at her again, really looked. The tired lines on her face, the strength behind her quiet voice. "How long have you been here?" he asked gently. She hesitated. Sharing time felt like sharing pain. "Long enough," she said. He respected that answer. He brought her food again that night, and the night after that. Sometimes they didn't. He never asked too many questions. He never tried to push her story out of her. Slowly, she started to speak on her own. She told him about working long hours for little pay, about promises that were never kept, about losing her place to live when everything fell apart at once. She did not go into details. She did not cry. She spoke like someone telling an old memory that still hurt but no longer surprised her. He listened. Not like someone waiting to reply, but like someone who wanted to understand. "I didn't plan for my life to turn out this way," she said one evening. Staring at the ground, "Most people don't," he replied. Those words stayed with her. He told her about his life too, but in a simpler way. Long days, constant pressure, always moving, always thinking about what was next. He had everything he was supposed to want, yet something always felt missing. She laughed softly when he said that. "That's funny," she said. "Why?" "Because people like me think people like you have no problems," he smiled. "And people like me think people like you are stronger than we could ever be." That surprised her. Days turned into weeks. The weather changed. Some nights were colder. Some days were louder. Through it all, they kept meeting outside that restaurant. People began to notice. Staff members glanced at them. Some smiled. Some whispered. He did not care. She cared a little, but less than she used to. One night it started raining hard. The street emptied quickly. She pulled her thin jacket tighter, trying to stay dry. He arrived, saw the rain, and frowned. "You can't stay like this," he said. "I'll be fine," she replied automatically. He took off his coat and held it out to her. She shook her head. "No, I insist," he said, not loudly, not forcefully, just firmly. She hesitated, then took it. The warmth surprised her more than she expected. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, he stayed longer than usual, standing near her, so the rain did not fall directly on her, for the first time in a long while. She felt protected, and that feeling scared her, because protection can disappear. Later that night, when the rain slowed, he spoke carefully. "Have you ever thought about leaving this place?" She looked at him. "Every day. Do you have anywhere you could go?" She shook her head. He nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already knew. "I don't want to rush anything," he said. "But if you ever need help, real help, you can tell me." She studied his face. She saw concern, not pride. Care, not control. "I don't want to be a burden," she said. "You're not," he replied without hesitation. That answer shook something inside her. That night, after he left, she cried quietly. Not from sadness, but from confusion. From the strange pain of being treated with kindness after so long, and as he walked away, he realized something about himself. He did not come back anymore just to help her. He came back because seeing her reminded him of something real, something honest, something his life had been missing. Neither of them said it out loud yet, but both felt it. Their lives were slowly becoming connected, one quiet evening at a time. The days that followed became a quiet rhythm. She would find her spot outside the restaurant. He would appear at a certain time, neither rushing nor lingering too long. The city moved around them, filled with noise and motion, yet their small corner seemed untouched by it. It was a fragile world, made up of shared glances, brief words, and simple gestures. She began to talk more. Not about the past that hurt her, but about things she liked, small dreams that had survived all the hardships. She told him about the smell of freshly baked bread from a small bakery she used to pass on her way to work. How she loved to watch children play in the park, and the rare moments when music made her feel lighter. Her voice was soft, but carried a weight that made him listen intently. He realized she was teaching him to notice things he had long ignored. One evening she laughed, a clear, warm sound that cut through the noise of the street. He had heard her laugh before, but this time it was different, spontaneous, genuine. He noticed the way her eyes lit up, the way her shoulders relaxed. He felt a strange mixture of relief and surprise. Relief that she could still feel joy, and surprise that someone so fragile could carry so much strength. He started to share more of himself too, but differently than before. He did not speak of business deals, money, or the stress of high living. Instead, he spoke of small frustrations, of moments that frustrated or amused him. It was odd to speak about such trivial things with someone he barely knew, yet it felt natural. She listened without judgment, without offering solutions. She simply understood, and that was all he needed. Their conversations began to drift beyond words. Sometimes they would sit quietly, letting the street sounds fill the air. Other times he would bring small things, a cup of tea, a warm pastry, or a book he thought she might like. She accepted them cautiously, wary of kindness that might vanish as quickly as it appeared. But slowly, a pattern emerged. She began to trust that he would return, that his gestures were not fleeting or self-serving. One rainy night, the city streets glistened with reflections of neon lights. She had taken shelter under a narrow awning, her thin coat doing little against the cold. He appeared suddenly, a familiar figure in the distance. In his hands, he carried 2 umbrellas and a small bag of food. He approached without hurry, his eyes scanning the street to make sure she was safe. "Here," he said, handing her the umbrella. "It's heavier than it looks." She hesitated, but the cold pushed her to accept it. "Thank you," she said softly, her fingers brushing as briefly as she took it. The contact was brief, yet it sent a warmth she did not expect through her chest. "You don't have to eat it all at once," he said, placing the food beside her. She smiled faintly. "I won't." He stayed nearby, not intruding but not leaving either. The rain fell steadily, the city quieting down as most people retreated indoors. In that moment, they shared a small universe of 2 people against the world, unnoticed by anyone else. Over time, he learned more about her resilience, how she had survived nights without shelter, how she had worked small jobs that paid barely enough to keep her going, and how she had faced rejection and indifference so often that it almost became normal. Yet she had not lost her sense of humanity. She helped others when she could, even if it meant giving the little she had. She smiled at strangers, offered a word to the lonely, and shared what warmth she could. That quiet courage impressed him more than anything he had. Encountered in his own world, he began to feel a change within himself. Seeing her struggle, yet still offer kindness, shifted something in him. It was not pity, not charity, but a deep respect and admiration. He realized that his wealth, his status, and his comfort had never taught him what she had lived every day: patience, endurance, and compassion without expectation. One evening, as they sat on the familiar step, he asked a question that lingered in the air for a long time. "Do you ever feel lonely?" She thought about it, then nodded. "All the time. But I've learned to be with myself." "Does that make it easier?" "Sometimes," she admitted. "Sometimes it makes it worse. But I survive." He remained silent for a moment, trying to understand. He had never had to survive in that way. Life had given him opportunities, doors, and people to rely on. But she had none of that, and yet she was still here, still present, still alive. That realization humbled him. Days passed, and their bond grew in unspoken ways. Small gestures became meaningful: a shared umbrella, a warm meal, a smile that lasted a little longer. They began to recognize the comfort of routine, the safety and familiarity. Each meeting was not a rescue, not an obligation, but a choice to be together, even in silence. One night, he brought a small notebook and a pen. "I thought you might like this," he said. She looked at it, surprised. "Why?" "Just for you to write things down. Thoughts, stories, dreams, whatever you want." She hesitated. Giving words a place could be dangerous. Words could trap feelings, make things permanent, expose vulnerability. But there was trust in him now, subtle but undeniable. She accepted it, and he smiled. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome," he replied. "No rush to write anything, just when you feel like it." The notebook became another bridge between them. She wrote small things, moments she remembered, thoughts about the city, reflections on people she had seen, and little dreams she'd barely allowed herself to hope for. Sometimes she would read them to him, and he would listen as if every word mattered, 'cause it did. Through their time together, he also began to notice the little things about her presence, how she folded her hands when she was thinking, how her eyes would narrow slightly when she tried to remember something, how her lips would twitch when she was holding back a thought or a laugh. Each detail was a part of her story he felt privileged to witness. He realized that she was not defined by her circumstances. Sitting outside a restaurant with nothing but a small bag and worn clothes, she was more than the image the world presented. She was strong, intelligent, and alive in ways that money and comfort had never taught him to be. And slowly, without force or rush, she began to see him not as a savior or an intruder, but as someone who genuinely cared. The walls she had built over years of disappointment did not crumble immediately, but cracks appeared, letting light in where darkness had ruled for so long. One chilly evening, they sat watching the city lights reflect in puddles on the street. He handed her a warm drink, and she took it with a small smile. For a moment, they simply existed together, no words necessary. In that silence, there was understanding, a quiet acknowledgement of trust and shared presence. It was in these moments that their connection deepened, beyond simple kindness. It became mutual recognitions, seeing someone fully and allowing oneself to be seen in return. The world could continue to rush past them, indifferent and loud, but in that corner outside the restaurant, they found a small haven of understanding. She did not know what the future would bring. She did not know if her life would ever change completely. But she knew that these moments, these small gestures of genuine care, were something she could hold on to. Something real in a world that often felt cruel and empty. And for him, he discovered a part of himself he had long ignored. The part that could still feel deeply, still notice the quiet strength of someone overlooked by everyone else. Still learn from someone who had survived more than he could imagine. Neither of them needed grand gestures or dramatic events. They simply needed presence, attention, and respect. And in that simple truth, a bond was forming, quiet but powerful, that neither the noise of the city nor the passing days could erase. As the night grew colder and the street emptied, they parted with a shared understanding. He walked away, carrying the weight of her story with him in his mind, and she remained, feeling seen in a way she had not felt for years. Both of them knew that this was only the beginning, that the path ahead would not be easy, but that for now they had each other in small, meaningful ways. The days had grown colder, and the city seemed harsher than before. Winter was approaching, and the wind cut through the streets, carrying with it the smell of wet pavement and distant smoke from chimneys. She sat wrapped in her thin coat, shivering, yet trying to make herself as comfortable as possible. She had grown used to cold nights, but it never truly became easy. The chill settled into her bones, reminding her that survival was not just a physical challenge, but an emotional one as well. He noticed the change immediately. When he arrived that evening, he stopped across the street, scanning her figure. The coat seemed thinner than before, the scarf loosely wrapped, and her hands, always folded neatly in her lap, were now tucked inside each other for warmth. Concern tightened his chest, the way it always did when he saw her exposed to the city in its harshest form. "Here," said, holding out a thick scarf and gloves. His voice was calm, steady, but the concern could be felt. "You should take these." She looked at the items, hesitated, and then slowly accepted them. "Thank you," she whispered, adjusting the scarf around her neck. The warmth was immediate, yet it did more than just keep her from freezing. It made her feel seen, cared for, in a way she had not allowed herself to feel for a long time. He sat down on the step next to her, careful to leave a respectful distance. Neither of them spoke at first. They simply watched the street, now quieter than usual, lit by the dim glow of street lamps reflecting in puddles. The silence between them had grown comfortable over the past weeks, filled with shared understanding rather than emptiness. "You're doing well," he said finally. She glanced at him, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Well is a relative term," she said. He laughed softly, a low, quiet sound that mingled with the evening air. "Then I'll just say you're surviving," he replied. She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes returned to the street, to the distant lights and shadows. Surviving was not a boast. It was a quiet achievement, one she rarely recognized herself. "I want to help you more," he said after a pause. "Not just with food or clothes, but with other things. A place to stay, someone to rely on." She froze slightly. The idea of dependence made her uncomfortable. She had lived her entire life learning to rely only on herself. Asking for help felt like weakness, even when she desperately needed it. "I don't want to be a burden," she said quietly. "You're not a burden," he replied firmly. "You're a person. You deserve help, just like anyone else." She looked into his eyes, searching for insincerity, for a hidden agenda, but found none. There was only concern, care, and patience. It was almost foreign to her, and yet comforting. Slowly, she began to trust that he meant what he said. The next evening, he returned with arrangements he had quietly made. A small room in a nearby boarding house, simple and clean, with a bed, a small desk, and a window that let in the soft city light. It was not luxurious. It was warm and safe a place where she could finally rest without fear of the cold or the night. "I don't know what to say," she said, stepping inside the room for the first time. The walls were bare, but it felt like more than she had had in months. "Then don't say anything," he replied gently. "Just take it for what it is. A chance to rest. A place to be safe." She walked around the room, touching the edges of the furniture, feeling the solidity of it, the normalcy. For a long time, she had lived with impermanence, always alert, always ready to move. This room was stability, and it was frightening and comforting all at once. Days passed in this new routine. She began to sleep better, eat regularly, and think more clearly. The fear that had always followed her slowly receded, replaced by a cautious optimism. She started exploring small things again, a nearby park, a quiet street, even the occasional bookstore window. Life was simple, but it was life. He visited frequently, bringing food, talking with her, sharing the quiet moments they had learned to value. He encouraged her to pursue small goals, a part-time job, writing in her notebook, even cooking small meals for herself. Each achievement, no matter how small, was a victory. One evening, he asked her about her dreams, not the small day-to-day ones, but the ones she had buried long ago. She hesitated. Dreams had a way of breaking, of leaving empty spaces when they failed. But he waited patiently without rushing her. "I used to want to travel," she said finally, her voice soft. "See places I had only read about, meet people I had never imagined, feel the world outside this city. It's a beautiful dream," he said sincerely. "And it's not too late." She looked at him, a mix of hope and disbelief in her eyes. Hope had been dangerous before, but his calm assurance made it feel possible. Perhaps dreams could exist again, even if they started small. The city around them continued, indifferent yet alive. She began to see patterns, the rhythm of daily life that she had once been too weary to notice. She watched children play, neighbors help one another, and strangers share brief moments of kindness. It reminded her that she was part of a larger world. Not just a person surviving in isolation. He noticed her growing confidence. The subtle changes in posture, the way she walked with slightly more certainty. The way her eyes sparkled when she spoke of something she wanted. It was not sudden, but gradual, and it made him proud in a quiet, unspoken way. One evening, she cooked a small meal in the room he had helped her secure. He watched from the doorway, quietly observing her skill, patience, and care. It was ordinary, yet it felt extraordinary because it was her reclaiming a part of herself that had been lost. "This smells wonderful," he said, his voice filled with genuine appreciation. She smiled shyly. "I'm learning. You've always known," he replied. "You just didn't have the chance." They shared the meal together in silence, the comfort of companionship filling the room. It was simple, yet for both of them, it was profound. She had a space to be herself, and he had the privilege of witnessing her growth. being part of her story without trying to control it. Over time, she began to see herself differently. No longer just a person surviving on the streets, she was someone capable of small victories, someone worthy of care, and someone with dreams worth pursuing. The walls she had built around herself did not fall entirely, but they softened, letting light and warmth in, and he in turn realized that helping her was not about charity or duty. It was about connection, about understanding another human being in a way that challenged and enriched his own life. He had thought he knew what care meant, but she taught him that true care was patient, respectful, and unconditional. As winter deepened, they continued to meet, to talk, and to share quiet moments. Their bond grew stronger, built on trust and mutual respect rather than dependency or expectation. The world outside could remain indifferent, chaotic, and harsh, but in their shared moments, with stability, warmth, and understanding. She did not know what the future would bring, nor did he. But for the first time in a long time, she felt the possibility of a life that was not defined by survival alone. And he felt the profound impact of witnessing resilience and humanity in its purest form. The journey was far from over. Challenges remained, and the world outside was still unpredictable. But in the small room, in the quiet evenings, and in the simple acts of presence and care, they found a life worth living. Slowly, gently, she was reclaiming herself. He was learning the depth of what it meant to truly see another person. Winter was fading, and the city began to change with the first hints of spring. The air was warmer, softer, carrying the scent of wet earth and new beginnings. She had grown accustomed to her new life, the small room, the simple meals, the warmth of safety, but she knew it was not just the season that had changed. She had changed too. She walked through the streets with a lightness that had been absent for years. People passed by, busy in their routines, and she noticed them in a new way. Faces, expressions, small gestures that used to go unseen now caught her attention. It was as if the city itself was alive, and she was part of it again. The streets that had once felt harsh and uninviting now held possibilities she had thought long gone. He continued to visit, as he had for weeks. Each time he brought small gifts, not out of obligation, but because he enjoyed sharing a part of his world with her. Sometimes it was a book, sometimes a pastry, sometimes just his presence. They talked less about hardships now and more about ideas, dreams, and the small joys of daily life. One evening, as they walked through a quiet street lined with early blossoms, he asked a question that had been lingering in the air for some time. "Have you thought about what comes next?" She stopped and looked at him, considering the weight of the question. For a long time, the answer had been survival. Now, it was something different. "I think. I want to work on my own life," she said slowly. "I want to create something, even if it's small, something that's mine." He nodded, a quiet pride in his eyes. "That's wonderful," he said. "And you can. I'll help you if you need it, but it's yours to build." She felt a swell of gratitude, but also a spark of determination. This was not about depending on someone else. It was about reclaiming herself, her choices, and her independence. She had survived the streets, but now she wanted to thrive, to create, to exist fully and without fear. In the weeks that followed, she began to take steps toward that goal. She found a small job, one that allowed her to interact with people, learn new skills, and earn enough to support herself. It was not easy. There were moments of self-doubt, fatigue, fear, but she faced them with the resilience she had built over years of struggle. Each small success reinforced her confidence, and she began to see the possibility of a future she had never dared to imagine. He watched this transformation quietly, deeply moved by her courage. It was not his doing. He had only provided the opportunity. The strength came from within her, from a life lived through hardship and survival. Seeing her rise, piece by piece, inspired him in ways he could not have predicted. He realized that wealth and comfort could not teach these lessons, and that sometimes the most profound teachers are those who have faced the harshest realities. One day, as she returned from work, she found him waiting outside her room. He held a small envelope, simple and unassuming. She took it, curious. Inside was a note. For when you feel unsure, you have everything it takes. Her eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of recognition, of understanding, of feeling seen and supported without condition. She looked up at him and smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile. "Thank you," she said. "Not just for this, but for everything." He shook his head. "You earned it," he replied. "All of it. You've been brave, patient, and resilient. I've only watched." And that evening, they walked together through the park. The air was filled with the scent of blossoms and the sound of birds returning. Children played nearby, their laughter bright and untainted. She felt a sense of normalcy she had not known in years. The fear that had once dominated her life had not vanished entirely, but it no longer controlled her. She had reclaimed her space, her life, and her dignity. They sat on a bench, watching the world move around them. Neither spoke for a while, comfortable in the shared silence. Words were not necessary. Presence was enough. In that quiet moment, they both understood the depth of their connection. It was not bound by obligation, pity, or dependence, but by mutual respect and understanding. They had witnessed each other's humanity and had chosen to stay present. Over time, she began to dream again, not only of survival, but of creation, of connection, and of life beyond mere existence. She thought about traveling, learning, and sharing her story. She considered helping others in situations she once faced, using her experiences to guide and support. Each idea was a spark, a possibility that had been dormant for years, now flickering to life. He encouraged her quietly, offering advice only when asked and stepping back when not needed. He had learned that true support was not about control or direction, but about trust and patience. He realized that by giving her space to grow, he was witnessing the full extent of her strength. It was a lesson he would carry forever, that the greatest transformations come from within. With only gentle guidance from those who care, as spring deepened, they spent more time together in ordinary ways, sharing meals, discussing small ideas, walking through quiet streets, and enjoying simple pleasures. Life was no longer about the survival of each moment, but about living fully, noticing details and appreciating the world as it unfolded. She had learned to hope without fear, to dream without guilt, and to exist without apology. One evening, as they sat outside a small cafe, he reached across the table and gently took her hand. "You've come so far," he said softly. "You've taken control of your life, reclaimed your strength, and found hope again. I'm proud of you." She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of gratitude and recognition. "I couldn't have done it without your support," she replied. "But it's mine too. This life, my choices, my future, it's mine," he smiled, squeezing her hand lightly. "Yes, it is. And I'll always be here if you need me, but I know you won't need me in the same way anymore. You're stronger than you realize." That night, as they parted, she felt a profound sense of closure and new beginnings. The journey from the girl sitting outside a restaurant with nothing to a woman reclaiming her life was complete in many ways. She had survived, grown, and thrived. And he had witnessed the power of resilience and humanity firsthand. In the weeks and months that followed, she continued to build her life. She worked, learned, and dreamed. She shared small kindnesses with others, spreading the care and respect she had received. She no longer saw herself as invisible, but as someone capable of influence, connection, and impact, and he continued to be a quiet presence in her life, not as a savior or a provider, but as a friend, a witness, and a companion in her journey. The bond they shared had evolved beyond the initial circumstances of survival into something deeper: mutual respect, understanding, and genuine care. In the end, it was not wealth, privilege, or power that defined their story. It was recognition, empathy, and the simple act of seeing another human being fully. She had been invisible to the world, but she had never been invisible to him. And through that recognition, both of their lives had been changed forever. She had nothing at the start, yet she meant everything to him. And in the process, they both discovered what it truly means to value, support, and respect another human being. Their lives, forever intertwined, became a testament to the quiet power of care, connection, and resilience, showing that even in a harsh world, hope and humanity could flourish.